I would like to begin the first episode of Doing Academia Differently by acknowledging and paying my respects to the elders, past and present, of the Ugambe Nation on whose land I'm recording this episode from. Hi, my name is Dr. Karnika Bansal, and I'm a law lecturer at Southern Cross University in Australia. The views expressed in this series are my own and are not made on behalf of the university or any other organization. I'm ethnically Indian, first generation immigrant, and an early career female academic who began my academic journey with the start of my doctoral degree in 2019 in Melbourne. As someone who had never taught a class before, I still remember my first day as a sessional lecturer in the classrooms of Swinburne University and gaining a whole new respect for every lecturer and mentor who shaped me past and present. But things changed quickly when COVID hit in 2020. And since then, it's been a roller coaster of learning what it really means to be an academic in a sector that keeps shifting under our feet. I wanted to start doing academia differently because whether we like it or not, the way we teach and research the core pillars of academic life are changing. And for early career academics like myself, we're living in the middle of the old and the new ways of doing things. And my intention is not to add to the noise, it is to create a grounded place to share ideas and experiences, no matter what stage of your legal or academic career you're at. As a lawyer turned academic, I hope you enjoy the very first episode of Doing Academia Differently.
I want to start the first episode with a bit of a confession. I use ChatGPT constantly. I use it to draft emails. I use it to brainstorm ideas. I even used it yesterday to figure out my workout plan. And because I use it every day, I have successfully tricked myself into believing that I understand AI. It is a great illusion of our time. Because it feels accessible, it feels that I'm informed. But we are looking at a book today that basically grabs us by the shoulders and says, stop. You are using the tool without understanding the tool. So for my very first episode, I'm diving into the world of AI with Richard Susskind's 2025 book titled How to Think About AI, A Guide for the Perplexed. And we are looking at it specifically through the lens of someone, say, just entering the workforce, an early career academic like myself, or a lawyer who's realizing that being a digital native might not actually save them. Yeah, that label, digital native, is so tricky. We assume that because, somebody from my generation grew up with iPads, we would instinctively understand neural networks. But that's like saying, because I know how to drive a car, I'm qualified to be a mechanic for a Formula One team. And the gap between driving the car and understanding the engine is where I think careers are going to be either made or lost in the next decade. So let's strip away the magic. If we are going to understand this structural shift, where do we actually start? Because usually when people explain AI to me, they start talking about algorithms. And I, like many people with non-technical backgrounds, start thinking about lunch. So if you take nothing else from this conversation, remember this. AI is not magic. It is pattern recognition running on massive data sets. In other words, it's basically a superpowered game of connect the dots. On a scale of billions, it looks at a massive amount of text or imagery, finds the patterns, and then just predicts what should come next. But here's the catch. The system is only as good as the data it feeds on, which is also known as the garbage in, garbage out concept. However, in my view, it's deeper than that. It is also bias in, bias out. If the historical data contains gaps or prejudices or errors, the AI does not just copy them, it codifies them. It turns a historical accident into a future rule. For example, if we have a legal system that has historically been biased against a certain demographic and we feed that case law into an AI, the AI will likely replicate that bias, thinking it's just a pattern of successful law. That is the structural risk, and that is and should be unsettling. But to understand why are we even using these systems, we have to look at how Susskind categorizes the tech itself. He notices that people get stuck in a jargon trap. I'm definitely stuck in that trap. And I read articles about large language models, and I feel like I just need another PhD to finish the paragraph. Susskind calls this the technologist's way of defining AI. It focuses on the how, and he lists the words that usually baffle people. Things like neural networks, backpropagation, and adversarial machine learning. Okay, let's pause there because usually this is the part where many of us zone out. But I feel like we should at least know what these things are before we dismiss them. So, what on earth is backpropagation? It sounds complex, but it's actually a pretty simple concept. Imagine a student taking a test, getting a question wrong, looking at the correct answer, and then adjusting their brain so they don't make that mistake again. Backpropagation is just the math that allows the system to, grade its own homework and then adjust its internal weights to get the right answer next time. In short, it's error correction. And when we think neural networks, it's simply a computer architecture inspired by the human brain nodes connected to the other nodes, passing information along. Now, when I explain these terms, they don't sound very complicated, do they? But Susskind's point is, you don't need to know that. And hey, I know you just learned it, and now I'm kind of telling you to forget it. Because Susskind argues that for a lawyer or an educator or a business leader, focusing on backpropagation is a distraction. It's the technologist's way. He wants us to use the practical way. Don't ask how the spark plugs fire, ask where the car can take you. So focusing entirely on what the system can do, capability over complexity. Because when you look at the capability list that Susskind provides, it is staggering. And it's not just writing college essays. And I've got the list here. It's managing power grids, scheduling flight paths to cut emissions, co-piloting military aircraft. That is a reality. We are trusting software to co-pilot fighter jets, and we are trusting it to detect human emotional states. There are systems now that can analyze microexpressions to determine if someone is lying or stressed or happy, which brings us back to the legal profession. I mean, if you have an AI that can read a jury's faces better than a human lawyer can, that changes the game. It changes the game completely. And this brings us to the biggest hurdle that Susskind identifies, and it's not a technical one. It's a psychological hurdle. He calls it the human-centric error. This is the defense mechanism, according to me. It's me saying, sure, a computer can play chess, but it can't write a moving closing argument. It can't empathize with a client. It's the belief that because professional work like law or teaching has always been done by humans, it must be done by humans to be valuable. But isn't that a valid point? If I'm in trouble, I want a human who understands my fears. I want empathy. A machine doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't have a soul. That is the emotional argument, and it is powerful. But Susskind challenges it with a very cold, hard question. What are you actually paying for? I'm paying for help. Are you paying for the process of being helped or the outcome of the help? Susskind quotes the poet William Blake here. He talks about mind-forged manacles. We are chaining ourselves up mentally. We are chained to the idea that the process matters more than the result. But let's challenge the example. If you are facing a tax audit that could bankrupt you, Do you want a lawyer who holds your hand and empathizes with your fear but misses a loophole? Or do you want a cold, soulless machine that knows every tax code change from the last 50 years and guarantees you pay zero penalties? Put it that way, I don't want to go bankrupt. If the AI delivers the superior outcome, the diagnosis is more accurate, the contract is watertight, the tax advice is perfect, then the lack of humanity in the process kind of becomes irrelevant. And that is a tough pill to swallow. But it is also why we're seeing a rise in DIY law cases. And that leads us to Susskind's framework for how this disruption actually plays out. He breaks it down into three specific categories: automation, innovation, and elimination. Okay, let's walk through these because I think people tend to lump them all together as just tech, which they are, but they are also very different stages. So the first is automation. This is what we've largely been doing for the last 30 years. It's the turbocharging phase. Automation takes a task people already do and makes it faster or more efficient. So in a law firm, that might mean using a search engine to find a case file instead of walking to a dusty basement to locate a box. Same outcome, just quicker. In that sense, automation is like a faster horse, and it appeals very much to the professionals like lawyers because the job stays the same, it just gets easier. Then comes innovation. Innovation is where we start to change the process. We deliver the outcome the client wants, but in a way that looks totally different, like online dispute resolution. The outcome people often want is settling a disagreement. The old way is courtroom, a judge, expensive wigs, and waiting 6 months. The innovative way might be an algorithmic platform where you upload your evidence, the other party upload theirs, and the system proposes a fair settlement based on data. No courtrooms, no wigs, same outcome, justice, but a radically new method. And then we get to the third category, the one that keeps professionals awake at night: elimination. And yes, that sounds ominous, and it is the most radical concept. And to understand it, Susskind uses a really interesting historical analogy: the poop problem. Yes, you heard it right, the poop problem. In cities like London, New York, and Paris, and really anywhere in the 19th century that ran on horses, the sheer number of horses created a serious and obvious waste problem, and tons of it. I mean, now we could say it was a crisis. The streets were buried in it. It was a health hazard, it smelled terrible, and it was logistically impossible to clean up fast enough. So if you were a manure removal specialist back then, business was booming. It was a secure career. Now, if you were thinking in terms of automation, you would try to invent, I don't know, a mechanical scooper to clean it up faster. You try to optimize the cleanup. But then the internal combustion engine arrived, the car. And the car didn't just move people faster. It didn't automate the manual removal. It caused the complete elimination of the waste problem. Suddenly, there was no manure to scoop. The problem itself just vanished. And the manure removal specialist didn't just need to learn a new tool. Their entire reason for existing disappeared. So let's bring this back to the office. What is the horse manure of the legal world? What's the problem that just vanishes? Now, this is just a hypothetical, but think about the churn of routine legal drafting. Junior lawyers or clerks producing first drafts of standard documents, then seniors reviewing, revising, and polishing. So a lot of the mess here is repetitive. The same clauses, the same structures, the same compliance checks, the same back and forth to catch errors and inconsistencies. So in this analogy, junior lawyers and clerks are often the ones holding the shovel, doing the time-consuming cleanup work to get a draft into usable shape. But imagine a world of elimination. Not drafting faster, but a system where the draft is generated correctly from the outset because the legal logic is embedded into the workflow. Picture client inputs captured in structured form, linked to a clause library, jurisdiction rules, and the organization's risk settings. So the document assembles itself, flags issues in real time, and outputs a near final version that's already consistent, compliant, and tailored. If that becomes the default, the problem of messy first drafts needing extensive human cleanup starts to disappear. And when the problem disappears, the traditional role built around producing and tidying first drafts shrinks dramatically too. That's elimination. It's not doing the same job faster. It's removing the conditions that made the job necessary in the first place. And that's confronting for the profession, especially for entry-level pathways. And while it may sound terrifying, it is also kind of exciting if you are a client, a sole practitioner, or a small to medium law firm, as it could potentially save you hours and money and a lot of it. But for the profession as a whole, the real question becomes, how quickly do we move from automation of drafting to rethinking the entire drafting process? And what happens to training and progression when the shovel work reduces? And how fast is this happening? Susskind lays out a timeline, short, medium, and long term. So where are we now? We are firmly, in his view, in the short term, which is the automation phase, efficiency, productivity, AI, checking contracts, drafting emails. This is the co-pilot era, which feels quite manageable. So what's the medium term? The medium term is where the silos start to crumble. Susskind predicts that the boundaries between professions will break down. And what would it look now? Well, right now, if you have a business problem, you might go to a lawyer for the contract, an accountant to the numbers, and a consultant for the strategy. 3 different people, 3 different bills. And they probably don't even talk to each other, right? But an AI system doesn't care about those boundaries. It can synthesize legal, financial, and strategic data simultaneously. So in the medium term, you might not hire a law firm. You might subscribe to a business risk platform that handles all of it at once. So the distinct identity of I'm a lawyer versus I'm an accountant starts to blur. Yes, and then it comes to the long term, the rise of the AI-empowered client. And it sounds like the WebMD Fed, but for everything, on steroids. So if the AI is trained on all the best legal knowledge in the world and it's accessible via a chat interface, why does a corporation need to pay a junior associate $500 an hour to tell them what the law says? They can just ask the system. This leads to the quote in the book that gave me actual goosebumps. And here it goes. The competition that kills you won't look like you. The competition that kills you won't look like you. That haunts me, as it should. Law firms spend all their time worrying about other law firms. Harvard worries about Yale. But Susskind is saying, no, your competition is not another person in a suit. Your competition is a piece of software living on your client's server. So what does this all mean for the law student of today? It means we have to be honest about what's shifting in the early stages of legal work. Students are still graduating with core skills like legal research, document review, and basic drafting, but these are also the first tasks being automated and in some cases reshaped entirely by Gen AI-enabled workflows. The risk is not that these skills no longer matter. It is that the way they're performed, assessed, and valued is changing faster than many programs are adapting. So if we don't respond, we end up with an educational gap. Students paying tuition to master processes that the profession is actively redesigning. And this is where Susskind's point about the implementation challenge really lands for universities. He asks, how do you change the wheel on a moving car? Because universities can't press pause. You can't stop teaching for 2 years while you rebuild curriculum, rewrite assessments, retrain staff, redesign integrity frameworks, and work out what competence looks like when AI is embedded into practice. Cohorts keep coming, accreditation cycles keep moving, staff workloads remain, and at the same time, you're expected to modernize quickly, credibly, and safely. So, the challenge, in my view, for universities is running the current model while building the next one, keeping the degree rigorous and defensible today, while redesigning what students learn, how they practice, and how they are assessed for the world they are actually entering. And the institutions that manage this transition, well, won't just keep up, they will shape what good legal education looks like in the Gen AI era. So let's try to land this plane. We have covered the jargon trap, the mind forge manacles, the three disruptions, and the nightmare of implementation. If I'm a listener, maybe I'm that lawyer or that educator or just someone nervous about their job, what is the one thing I should take away from this? I think the most empowering takeaway is to change your filter. Stop being intimidated by the how. Ignore the neural networks, ignore the backpropagation, ignore it for a second. Focus relentlessly on the what. Look at every tool and ask, is this automation? Is it just making me faster? Or is this innovation? Or is this elimination? Am I just shoveling faster or is the manure about to disappear? Once you categorize the threat or the opportunity, you can then plan your next moves around it. You can move toward the things that AI can't eliminate yet. And I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something Susskind hints at that I think we'll be debating for decades. We spend a lot of time asking if AI can think, but if we go back to that mind-forged manacles idea, Susskind suggests that the origin of the thought might not matter. It is the ultimate provocation. If the medical diagnosis saves your life, if the legal strategy keeps you free, if the lesson plan helps the students learn, does it actually matter if the intelligence behind it was biological or silicon? Does the truth require a human author? Well, let me know what you think. Thank you for joining me on this very first episode of Doing Academia Differently. I will see you next time.